Sorry, got stuck with the video.
All right, so that's everyone in the room, and we'll see if our Zoom participants are ready. Maybe we'll start with the city of Santa Rosa. We're just getting started. All right, well, how about SCTCA staff who are remote?
Good morning, Ross Clendon, SCTCA.
James Cameron, SCTCA. I'm remote and about 100 feet away. Thank you.
Right.
Hey, Noah, sorry, my video is disabled by the host, so I can't show you my face. But anyway, Jessica Jones, City of Santa Rosa.
Feel free to just jump in there if you're on Zoom.
Will Lyons, Permit Sonoma, Unincorporated County.
Gillian Adams with ABAG and MTC.
Sophie Gable-Scheinbaum with ABAG and MTC.
Paul Massar with ABAG and MTC.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to item 2 on the agenda is the administrative function of the meeting. So we're going to look to our notes, and we have 4 voting members in the office or in the meeting today. And that's not quite a quorum. So we will move on from the meeting notes and move ahead with the agenda. And so that takes us right to regional updates, item 3. And this is a presentation from MTC ABAG.
And the first item is the transit-oriented communities policy.
So I believe this is Gillian Adams for TOC policy update.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And I am joined by my colleagues, Sophie and Thomas, to give you guys an update on the latest on the transit-oriented communities policy and how it might relate to our One Bay Area grants program, cycle 4. And so we started this conversation with jurisdictions about these topics earlier this spring. At that time, we shared a draft TOC evaluation framework, and now we are returning to you to share some potential adjustments to it that respond to the feedback that we've heard since the spring. These potential adjustments are going to be shared with MTC commissioners at their annual workshop on October 22nd and 23rd. And the workshop is really an opportunity for our commissioners to learn about and discuss some of the key issues that they're going to come before them in the coming year. And so the agenda items for that meeting are informational items. Our packet has not yet been posted, but we do anticipate that happening by Monday. So I guess starting, it's also why I don't have any slides to share with you today. So first I wanted to review kind of the draft proposal for TOC evaluation that we shared in the spring. And I'm going to share my screen of a document that might look familiar to some of you, which is our draft scoring criteria itself. And so Jen, again, just as a kind of high level, the TOC evaluation framework is intended to be a detailed weighted scoring system that evaluates compliance across the TOC policies for policy components, which are density, housing, parking, and station access. And while each policy component has a different number of standards, each component itself is weighted equally at 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. Jurisdictions would receive a certain number of points for each of the standards within the policy component. Those are added together for a total component score. And then those again are added together for a score for each TOC area. Jurisdictions that have multiple TOCs would average their area scores for a total jurisdiction score. In the original proposal from the spring, a jurisdiction's total score would be used to categorize it into one of the 3 compliance levels that would define as access to OBAG 4 funding. So as you may recall, we had a level 1, which meant that a jurisdiction would be eligible for funding that supports TOC compliance. We had a level 2, commonly referred to as the yellow level, that would have allowed jurisdictions to be eligible for all OBAG 4 funding. And then level 3, the green, which was jurisdictions would be eligible for all OBAG 4 funds, plus an additional specific TOC set aside. So what we heard in response to the release of that framework earlier this spring was really that many of the jurisdictions are making progress in meeting our TOC policy requirements, but that there was concerns that some have limited staff and resources that make complying with the policy challenging. Stakeholders also highlighted the need for flexibility to make the TOC policy feasible in different contexts, particularly given the diverse nature of Bay Area communities. And then as a result, there was a strong preference that the TOC compliance should be incentive-based, encouraging progress through carrots rather than a strict eligibility thresholds. In response to this feedback, staff is proposing changes to both the TOC evaluation framework and how compliance impacts OBAG. First, many jurisdictions have asked how we would treat work in progress, and staff's proposal for the evaluation framework is to award full points for policies or projects that are in motion. Second, staff is recommending adjustments to the scoring framework to reduce complexity, increase the flexibility, and respond to some of the feasibility challenges that have been identified by jurisdictions. So for the density component of the TOC policy, we propose to lower the point weight for the office minimum from 4 points to 2 points, to lower the point weight for the office maximum from 5 points to 3 points, and increase the weight for residential maximums from 8 points to 12 points. And this is again responding to feedback that we heard from jurisdictions about the challenges of office development, particularly in the current market. For the housing component, at this time, we're not proposing any specific changes to the scoring or weights. We do anticipate publishing revised TOC administrative guidance later this fall to change some of the requirements related to funding sources, funding amounts, and multiple policies considerations in response to some of the comment letters that we received in the spring and summer. And then we've also heard recently some concerns from stakeholders about tenant protection policies, which is going to be part of the conversation at the commission workshop. So for the parking component, we propose to reduce the total points for parking maximums for commercial uses and residential uses from 6 points each to 4 points each. It's on the whole screen here. A lot of TOC policy parking requirements. We will also recommend easing the parking maximum ratios for partial compliance and adding an option to receive a point for having any parking maximum ratio at all. We also propose increasing the points awarded for shared parking, unbundled parking, and a parking management policy. And for unbundled parking and shared parking, we've also added some notes here that acknowledge state laws that cover aspects of the TOC policy requirements, and will give credit where jurisdictions just confirm that they're complying with state laws. And then lastly, we are recommending adding an additional parking credit option for bicycle parking minimums. And lastly, for station access, we propose to increase the points for station access gap analyses and to decrease the points for mobility hubs. We're also proposing to introduce partial credit options for the access gap analysis for addressing different travel modes. So again, all of these are intended to kind of increase the amount of flexibility, respond to some of the comments that we heard from jurisdictions about where they're facing challenges in meeting some of the TOC requirements. And then, stop. So then turning to the proposed adjustments, in terms of how TOC policy would relate to OBAG 4, staff's proposal includes 2 different ways that jurisdictions could benefit from TOC compliance. First, staff proposed that jurisdictions would receive points in OBAG project scoring based on their jurisdiction's TOC score. A higher TOC score would make a jurisdiction more competitive for OBAG 4 funding through the OBAG 4 county program in early 2026. More specifically, staff is proposing that a jurisdiction with a score from 0 to 39 points would receive 0 points for the TOC component of the project score. A jurisdiction with a score from 40 to 69 points would receive 7.5 points, and a jurisdiction with a score from 70 or more points would receive 15 points. These TOC points would be out of a total possible score of 110 points, and jurisdictions without a TOC would receive a default of 7.5 points. Second, staff is proposing that there would be a regional TOC set aside that would be phased in starting in 2028. Delaying the set aside for several years would give jurisdictions more time to complete the work needed to comply with TOC requirements. As currently proposed, a jurisdiction would be eligible for the set aside if it has a score of 85 points or higher. So in terms of next steps, our anticipated schedule is that we are having this commission workshop next week to discuss the TOC incentive alternatives and OBAG 4 capacity alternatives. Again, the packet should be out by Monday, so you can see more details. We anticipate that later in the year that there's going to be committee review of the OBAG 4 draft policy. And then in early 2026, we're anticipating commission adoption of the TOC implementation framework and the OBAG 4 final policy. And then again, following that in the early 2026 would be the OBAG 4 county call for projects. And that is my brief update, and happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gillian. Is there any questions from our panel members? So I do have one. I was wondering about how SB 79 is anticipated to play into scoring, especially given that some jurisdictions were kind of carved out. And so North Bay specifically, we're not subject to SB 79, whereas a lot of the more urban areas of the Bay Area are going to be essentially automatically qualifying in some instances for the policies, just given that changes in state law are now forcing that.
That's a great and common question. We have not yet determined exactly how that's going to work out. We're working with kind of getting feedback from the state in terms of some of those questions about exactly where SB 79 will apply. I think there's the language in the statute is a little bit unclear on some of the different types of transit service. I know that doesn't apply for the North Bay, but that's kind of, we're working through some of those issues as we determine how it might apply for TOC. I think, what I would say is we have similar examples of particularly those parking policies where, after the adoption of the TOC policy, state law has kind of made some of those policies unnecessary for TOC. And in those situations, we've kind of, again, are giving local jurisdictions credit for complying with state law. It could be something similar to that, where if you are a jurisdiction that is subject to SB 79, that you would get credit for the maximum allowable densities. It doesn't apply. Jurisdiction would still need to address the minimum density requirements for the TOC policy in that situation. But at this point, I'll say it's on our radar to try to figure out exactly what the details would be, but that's kind of the thinking that we've done so far.
Okay, thanks for that. Keeping with the idea of carrots versus sticks, from a North Bay perspective, I think it might be helpful to consider some additional incentives for folks who aren't subject to those SB 79 mandates, but then also take the extra step to move forward with implementing TOC policy as directed by ABAG MTC. That would be, I think, a welcome kind of acknowledgement of that change or difference. And if staff is looking for kind of formal input, it may be nice to open up a letter opportunity or some mechanism whereby jurisdictions can provide some more detailed comments to ABAG MTC as they're kind of finalizing.
And do you mean specifically about SB 79 or just in general?
Well, I mean, since the whole thing's changing, you
Yeah.
could open it up, but I understand, you're trying to get it accomplished as well. So, I think just taking that into consideration, I think we've all kind of sharpened our pencils a bit as we've dived into this. And you alluded to some of the challenges with like, implementation of some of the tenant protection policies and things that, I mean, just as I've worked through it in my jurisdiction, some of the proposed ways to comply just frankly weren't really feasible for us, given our resources and the services that we provide because of how small of a jurisdiction we are. We have no housing authority in Cotati as an example. And so some of the tenant protection functions that were identified as a means of compliance just aren't available to us,
Okay.
given the size of our jurisdiction. So there is, I think, room to take feedback on kind of a wide range of the topics, but SB 79 specifically was kind of something that rose to my kind of awareness.
I mean, I guess what I would say, I think that's our intent, is to have to seek feedback during this process of getting from here to final adoption. So, I mean, we can certainly look into kind of how we frame that. I'm anticipating that we'll have several MTC committee meetings where those kinds of topics, in addition to this commission workshop, where all of the kind of the topics that you mentioned, I think will be part of the discussion. But
Great.
we'll certainly come out with information about how people can engage and weigh in.
Okay, and just one last idea, it could be like a structured set of questions. So if you're looking for specific areas, then you could just give us prompts to respond to versus like the whole 111 page policy implementation.
Fair. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Gillian, thanks for the information. You said materials will be available Monday or early next week.
That's what we're expecting. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, we can look for those and send those out to the group when they're available, and make sure the Public Works folks and the TAC gets those too.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll mention this in regards to SB 79. It's our read that even though the North Bay was not included in that any SMART owned properties as the TOD developer are still subject to that.
Huh?
And we don't own property at every station certainly, but Petaluma and Healdsburg do come to mind, and there will be other places I'm forgetting. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for that discussion. We'll move on to item 3B, which is an update on the priority conservation areas. And this is from Michael and Ben, I think.
Okay. You guys want me to bring up the slide deck?
If you don't mind, that'd
Yeah.
be great. Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Hi, everyone. Ben Botkin. I'm with the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, which is part of Metropolitan Transportation Commission and Association of Bay Area Governments. I am the Priority Conservation Area Grants Program Manager. I'm very happy to be here with Michael Germerod as well, who leads the Priority Conservation Area Program. And well, you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, I was involved on the PCAs as we were working to amend and nominate new PCAs, which we'll get into with the slides.
Great. Yeah, so today we'll talk a bit about the overall Priority Conservation Area Program, which consists of both the planning framework and the grant program. We are planning to release a grant program at the end of the month, so that'll be the focus of my discussion, but wanted to set up the context here. Next slide, please. So as folks are probably aware, priority conservation areas are locally nominated areas that are identified for regional significance for resilience, parks, farmlands, open space, and habitats. So the goal of the Priority Conservation Area Program is really to elevate these local conservation priorities to the regional level, and to do it in a way that is now data-driven and supports a regional framework where we're balancing our land use, identifying both important areas for development, but also thinking about what are the important areas that we want to protect and for what values. So the program was established back in 2007 alongside priority development areas, and priority conservation areas are nominated every few years, with the most recent one occurring just a few months ago. So again, these are locally nominated by cities, counties, and parks and open space districts on a voluntary basis, and then designated by the Association of Bay Area Governments Executive Board. Next slide, please. The first round of designations were back in 2008, and there have been a couple of updates since then, but the first really major update started in 2022 with the PCA planning framework refresh. And really the goal of that was to better integrate data and to help us to better define, what does it mean when we're saying something is of regional significance and a priority. And so by developing objectives, and outlining a stronger vision and goals with a great advisory committee that was made up of regional partners, we created objectives for each of the 5 PCA types, more clearly defining what it means to be a regional priority, refined our eligibility maps, and then did establish regionally identified PCAs, which were intended to be those areas that the data indicate are regional priorities, but maybe jurisdictions didn't have the capacity to be able to nominate them themselves. And so all existing PCAs were amended to match this refresh framework, and then there was also a call for new designations. Next slide, please. So for the amendments to existing PCAs, so you can see much of Sonoma County is or was already a designated PCA. There were 13, and so 12 of those needed amendments. One was already compliant and did not need to be amended. But really most of what was changed was a narrowing of the PCA types. So as I mentioned, there are those 5 types: natural lands, agricultural lands, regional recreation, urban greening, and climate adaptation. And climate adaptation is really meant as an overlay designation, so it can't just be a climate adaptation PCA. And so there were some changes, though, that resulted in we wanted natural lands and agricultural land PCAs to only be for areas outside of jurisdiction limits. And so we had a number of areas where there were natural land or agricultural lands within a jurisdiction, and those needed to be converted to either regional recreation or urban greening PCA types. Next slide, please. And so there were, back one, sorry. So there were 7 new PCAs that were identified and designated in this last round as well, primarily within the city of Sonoma and Petaluma and Rohnert Park. And so these ones were primarily urban greening and recreation type PCAs. As part of the designation process, did perform a lot of outreach and provided some web-based tools to assist in identifying and drawing those PCA boundaries. Michael, did you want to add anything here?
No.
Okay. All right, next slide, please. So moving over to the grant side, so we are preparing for our 4th round of PCA grants. So over the prior 3 rounds, in partnership with the State Coastal Conservancy, we've awarded over $38 million to 71 projects across the 9 counties. So these are projects that are really intended to enhance the natural qualities of the designated PCAs. So looking to enhance natural and agricultural land. So that can be anything from land acquisition, protection, restoration type projects, farm to market or agricultural economy supporting projects, improving access to the outdoors, particularly equitable access. So looking for areas where maybe there's a deficiency in parks and trails or gaps in key trails, how we can support closing those gaps and providing additional greening. And then building climate resilience. So really looking both, along the shoreline, but also inland and areas mitigating extreme heat, flooding, and other climate-based hazards. So we, as part of our One Bay Area grant program, or OBEG 3, we decided to split the total of $16.5 million that we had into 2 phases. And that was really to get those funds moving and to get them out, and recognizing that there was a significant need for project funding while the recent designation process was ongoing. And so that was an $8.5 million round that occurred last year, and ultimately awarded 13 projects, including 2 here in Sonoma County, one being the Southeast Greenway, supporting their master planning efforts in the city of Santa Rosa. And then we reserved 8 million for this next round, which will go out at the end of the month. Next slide, please. Another project that was funded here in the county for Sonoma County Regional Parks was the Sonoma Shellville Trail Design Project as well, to advance designs for that one along an old rail right of way. So this next $8 million call for proposals will be largely similar to our previous rounds. So all jurisdictions are eligible, as well as tribes, nonprofit, and community-based organizations. So these are for projects within those designated priority conservation areas. And we have maintained at the commission's direction that 50% of that overall 8 million will be for projects in the 4 North Bay counties. So gives projects up here a little bit of a better shot. And we are going to be updating our criteria a little bit just to really reflect the data and objectives of the priority conservation area refresh. And so there is a mailer, a 2-pager that was included in the packet as well that includes some links to what specifically those objectives are. But did want to note specifically that the PCA designation type does not limit the type of project that can occur. So if it's a natural lands designated PCA, a recreation type project would still be eligible. So we are just right now in the process of finalizing our grant guidelines. We will be releasing that call for proposals on October 30th. We will be holding a November 4th webinar. That will be recorded and posted to our website. So if that timing doesn't work, that information will still be available. And on our website on MTC, I'll include that link as well. There's a bit more information, but those guidelines will go out on October 30th. December 19th is when the letters of interest will be due. So it's a 2-phase process where the first phase really intended to be a lower barrier of entry, have that letter of interest, which just will be general project scope information, budget, timeline, who are the key partners. And then there will be an evaluation team that will be made up of staff of MTC, the Estuary Partnership, and the State Coastal Conservancy, which will evaluate those and invite a smaller group to then prepare full applications, which would be due in March. And then ultimately we'd hope to go to awards by summer of 2026. So that concludes my presentation and would be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Ben. We'll go to Zoom first. Are there any questions from our Zoom attendees? We're not seeing anyone. So anybody in the room here have any questions? All right, well, thank you, Ben. Excellent presentation and update. Really looking forward to seeing some of that information. And also, I would say I do appreciate when webinars are recorded, so our staff have opportunities to be able to check in if it doesn't fit their schedule. All right, with that, we'll move on to item 3C, which is the MTC ABAG Wildfire Resilience and Preparedness Effort. And I think this is from Michael.
So this is just a teaser for folks who are interested. On October 27th, we have a webinar. It's really the first time we've put on a webinar in this space since 2021. When the housing collaboratives were just getting started, folks were working on their housing elements. There was a lot of interest in bringing folks together to talk about wildfire. Since then, we haven't been doing much in this space, but I think the LA wildfires sparked an interest from the commission as well as the executive board, and there was a request for us to do work in this space. On the 27th, our focus within kind of the wildfire arena is focused on housing. We think that's an area where there's a role for ABAG to play. And we're going to bring together folks from the state as well as local entities. So from the state, we have the division chief for the building code, Crystal Sujeski, speaking on all the changes that have occurred there. Our staff will also speak on the fire hazard severity zone mapping, how that has changed. And then we'll also have someone from the city of Berkeley speaking. In addition to the state fire hazard severity zone maps, They've done their own local fire hazard mapping, adopted an EMBER policy, and we think that could be of interest to jurisdictions. We'll then have 2 presentations on home hardening programs at the state and local level. And then at the end of the webinar is going to be an opportunity for jurisdictions to share what additional technical assistance you'd like to see from ABAG in this space. We will have additional capacity. So if wildfire and housing are an interest in your jurisdictions and you think additional assistance would help you get across the finish line with a policy or program, we want to know what those interest areas are so that we can tailor our TA in 2026. That's all I have. I think in the agenda is a link to register. Yeah, and happy to take any feedback now on what kinds of TA you'd like to see in this space.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Is there any feedback on the presentation or questions or technical assistance input?
There's no online comment.
Okay. Michael, the one thing that I think we could maybe benefit from would be some workshop TA. So just resources that could go directly to residents. We struggle with that sometimes with just limited staffing and capacity. So that's something that if there was some expertise at a consultant level that could kind of go on a roadshow type thing around the different jurisdictions, we could even coordinate up here to try to, get some efficiencies of scale with having 1 or 2 that we invite multiple community members to. That I think would be something that would be beneficial. Great. All right. So Mr. Barney is going to give an update on transit priority policy for roadways, item 3D.
Yeah. So MTC staff actually presented on this earlier this spring, and basically the idea here is the region's looking at coordinating, interagency communication between transit providers and, public works departments, and making sure that projects that are being built, they're coexisting well together, right? And, bus service isn't negatively impacting bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and road projects aren't negatively impacting transit. So there's been a lot of work done on this over the last couple of years. So the draft policy was out in the spring, so there have been a few changes. So I've included a link to those materials in the agenda packet. But just to give a quick overview of the types of things that have changed, MTC has been very responsive to feedback received on the policy. So they considered conflicts with existing complete streets policies, inconsistencies with national standards like NACTO and MUTCD standards, being consistent with other planning efforts like ATPs and other plans, general plans, and then providing clarity. So there are a lot of more nebulous portions of the policy that they've cleaned up. So they've actually specified what types of projects this would apply for. So it would be required for any project requesting MTC endorsement or more than $250,000 in MTC discretionary funding on a facility that has existing transit service. So if there's no transit service there, you wouldn't have to comply with this. It would actually be implemented by adding a few additional questions to the Complete Streets checklist, which your public works folks deal with all the time when they're developing a project. And this information's already gone to the TAC, so they're aware, but just wanted to keep you all in the loop as well. So MTC is also developing a transit priority network. So they'll be using data and information to identify a regional network of priority transit corridors, and there'll be some additional requirements on there as well. So materials are linked in the packet. One thing that I would point out, if you dig into the FAQ document there, at the end of that document, there's a flow chart that kind of shows very simply how the process would play out for a project. So if you're interested and you want just a taste, I'd recommend taking a look at that flow chart to see, how the general flow would work. But yeah, more information there. Yeah, just wanted to make sure everyone is aware of those changes, and you know, that they're responsive to the comments that your public works colleagues and other folks in the region have made about the policy.
Okay, great. Is there any feedback for Mr. Barney? Okay, I know we struggle with kind of ensuring that we're engaging with the regional transportation network for public transit, so I do appreciate those extra efforts. Moving on to item 3E, this is looks like an update item for MTC Transportation Electrification Survey, or maybe just a reminder, and it's open until tomorrow, it seems. I don't know if there's anybody from staff.
Yeah, I can. So James Cho will be here, I believe next month to talk about the MTC electrification initiatives. They have a survey open through tomorrow. It's been open for a couple months on your experience with electrification in your community. So encourage you to take a look at that survey. It's, you know, relatively short, and you know, James will be on hand in the next couple of months to answer any questions that may come up as well.
Great. So I'd encourage all of our members to take that survey, make sure MTC staff has feedback from us. And with that, we'll move on to item 4, comprehensive transportation plan update from Ross, SCTCA staff.
Good morning. And I will share from here. Just get the presentation going. How are we looking? All right, so brief update on the comprehensive transportation plan engagement process. So public engagement is a key component of the CTP, and we wanted to make sure that this iteration of the plan reflects the diverse needs, priorities, and goals in terms of transportation for Sonoma County residents. The process was designed to be inclusive, equitable, and responsive, with a focus on reaching some of the communities and areas that don't always get outreach, which is always our goal, but we continue to endeavor to do that. So the goals and guiding principles, these goals align with the broader objectives of the community-based transportation planning program, CBTP, as well as the CTP's vision for a more connected, equitable, and sustainable transportation system. And the engagement followed a phased multimodal approach that emphasized listening, collaboration, and transparency. So we tried to really vary our approaches, you know, and hopefully both in time, in method, in format, just to try to get as much good spectrum of outreach. So target audiences, outreach efforts, we're looking for to engage a wide range of stakeholders as shown here, and data from these populations that were collected in the previous engagement efforts were also used. So that's a big part of this too. This update is truly an update, and so we are building directly on the previous CTP efforts a few years ago, which were a little more exhaustive, but a lot has changed. So we really wanted to try to. That was just a pre-pandemic or mid-pandemic document when it came out. So tactics and tools, it wasn't just me at a table like in the picture, but a big part of this, and what I'll be talking about in the future, is an online bilingual survey that we offered and really got out there as far as we could. We tried to do tabling, actually succeeded in doing tabling in each of the jurisdictions, including several in the West County. And, you know, so it's like farmers markets were one side, but then, you know, also some more like the Fix-It events out in West County, things like that. I will say that, you know, some of the communities that we were trying to reach, there is, you know, unfortunately right now kind of a bit of a palpable sense of fear. And so in the case of like North County, we worked with some of our partners. La Familia Sana in particular helped get surveys out to their community who was really not comfortable showing up to a mass event with government people, understandably. And so they were, I think, as always, leaning on the community-based organizations is a huge part of this. And yeah, very, very key. So we luckily did get some response through them. It was a little bit incentivized, but we put out paper survey, we put out, anonymous surveys because we just want the data. So the timeline, it's a 4-phase timeline. So we have a review of the past planning efforts happened, identifying the key themes, and then the outreach itself, partnering with CBOs to host events, conducting interviews, launching the survey that I mentioned, and then pop-ups in social media. I'm particularly relying on some of our partners to amplify that. Our reach as a often behind the scenes organization is not huge. So, trying to get amplified by, county, city, some of these larger things, really school districts, really help. And so the next phase will be sharing the draft comprehensive transportation plan. We're going to host a workshop here just to kind of get feedback on that. And then eventually final plan rollout with board approval and public release. And so key findings, just a little bit of a taste of what we heard. Sonoma County residents voiced strong support for safer, more connected infrastructure for walking, biking, and public transit. Many want alternatives to driving that reduce the traffic and environmental impact. And while EV interest is definitely there, big concerns remain about cost, access, and sustainability. We also heard about some of the challenges like long transit routes, limited rural service, and safety for non-drivers. A lot of people really would like to do more active transportation, but there's some concern there for safety. So let's just a few little tastes here. So kind of a transportation prioritization score. So interestingly, this first thing is prioritizing long distance or out of county trips. So we do have, as shown by our travel model, we do have a fair amount of people coming in and out of the county. So that was a concern. And we do have a lot of people that do drive. But biking is strong, rail service is strong. Yeah, this is kind of a very broad one, but basically seeing what people would like to improve. EV adoption, as mentioned, incentives to purchase electric vehicles is the big one, as well as access to charging stations. We did hear a little bit about e-bikes and scooters. Some people really liked them, but there's definitely some safety concerns there as well if people are not avid bikers and familiar with that. Reducing car use. So more frequent, easier to use transit was definitely the answer there. Free transit or discounted transit passes. I really need to touch on the fact that we kind of had an event at the Santa Rosa Junior College, and that corresponded with kind of the end of the Clipper, was it the Clipper Start program, the Bay Pass. So essentially there had been some free or subsidized transit passes that we worked on trying to extend, but it's a little bit out of our purview, but we got a lot of response from students on that. And actually did come address it and had folks come from MTC to some of our meetings to talk about that. But there is a big local student need looking at more transit options. So that was a good chunk of our feedback had mentions of that. And then equity in transportation, both kind of related to demographics, but also what we heard a lot of was geographic related. So I've got a picture of the Springs and a picture of West County out there. There's definitely, there's a lot of enthusiasm for the increasingly great options we have along the 101 corridor. We have a lot of people to the east and the west that want to find some better ways to access that. So that's something big we heard as well. In demographics overview, so older adults and younger residents. We did do, a good listening session with the Latino service providers, their youth group, which is pretty interesting because most of them are of driving age. They're just on that younger sector, and it's interesting. Many of them are willing to, consider other options. Many are definitely not, and so sometimes, it's good to hear the feedback that is it may be a little bit outside of what we're normally promoting, because that's out there. So mix of full-time, part-time. Interestingly, majority reported incomes under 50,000. So there was definitely a lower income, compared to Sonoma County medium income. Lower county skewed. Can't talk. Lower income skew to this, which I think is interesting. And geographically, as mentioned, we did get out entirely in the whole county, but Sebastopol, Santa Rosa, and Petaluma were the biggest responses. Santa Rosa and Petaluma, not surprisingly. Next steps. So we will be sharing the draft CTP with the public and with our committees for review and input. Incorporate that input, release it digitally. There will be a bilingual version, and as I mentioned, host a feedback event here to get some. I think we're going to do kind of an open house style where people can really get some one-on-one with our planners, and just to get their questions answered. And that is the update for the moment. I will say, just because I didn't mention it, full survey responses, we had just under 700. And it's a relatively involved survey, and that did involve open-ended questions. So we have a lot of pretty detailed feedback that we've been combing through that we'll incorporate into the CTP document. So let me know if you have any questions about the process or the results.
Thank you, Ross. Do we have any questions in the room or on Zoom?
No online comment. Are you going to provide the detailed comments to the operators, to the transit providers who may?
I'd be happy to. Yeah.
And then how are the results feeding into the CTP? How is this being incorporated?
So basically, we're working to identify all the key themes. And then, we have the data because there's, Chris might be able to talk about this a little more, but essentially we have, the actual data. There's a lot more than I showed here, but then the open-ended things, I group those both by category, and then, try to pull representative examples that are going to be included in the document. And then the actual bulk of that will be in the appendix of the document as well. And Chris may be able to provide a little more.
On that. And that, that's something that we always grapple with. You ask for all this feedback, and,
Right.
Where does it go? How is it informing, the project list process, the recommendations at the end, right? So from a project list standpoint, we are basically just taking submissions from each jurisdiction. So it's a big list of need, right? So, this engagement and feedback will really inform the recommended actions. And it will inform how we develop and how the goals and objectives and vision of the plan morphs over time. So we didn't really dig into the goals of the plan this time around. It's more of a limited update. But, the feedback we did receive are, pretty consistent with the goals we have in the plan right now. The final chapter of the plan we're working on are, it's focused on implementation. So we'll have recommendations that are in line with that outreach. in that section.
So you're not prioritizing project based on that?
None of the projects in the CTP are prioritized. So it's just a big list of need. So some of that is happening as part of SCTCA's funding program cycle 2.
That's what I was wondering, if this outreach is feeding into that.
So the outreach feeds into the goals, which inform the scoring for SCTCA's funding program. So that's the connection.
Got it.
Yep. And just a quick update on schedule. We're working on an internal draft right now. So we should be able to bring the draft CTP to this committee in December.
All right, great. Thank you, Russ.
All right, thank you very much.
On the agenda today is member updates. We usually give a brief summary of where we're at and any interesting projects occurring in our communities. And we'll start on Zoom today. If there's anybody, raise your hand, and anybody who wants to give a brief update on items of interest in your community. Not seeing any hands raised. We'll start here in the room, and I'm going to call on people. We'll go with John Jay for Sebastopol.
Sure. Thanks, Noah. So Sebastopol, on Tuesday of this week, just a couple days ago, we took a planning commission public workshop update for our zoning code and housing element implementation projects. Sebastopol's a little bit behind on a few of those programs and things like that. So we're working on getting those implemented as quickly as possible. It's probably going to be a 3-phase approach. So we're going to kind of take the low-hanging fruits first, and then work on the more extensive ones in the time coming. They do also have a few housing projects that are moving forward. The Canopy project that I worked on a few years ago, which is 80 townhome units, is starting their construction. They have another Habitat for Humanity project that's been in the works for a while. It's kind of right down on Main Street across from the Safeway. That is under construction as well. And St. Vincent de Paul Gravenstein Commons project on the north end of town that's starting construction, which is 22 units of very low income. So. And then one other project that's been in the hopper for quite some time, Huntley Square, which is a little bit further down on Bodega Avenue. It's 10 units of moderate income, kind of lower, smaller units. They're going to be starting their site work pretty soon here. There's a lot of grading work that needs to be done on that site. If you're not familiar with it, it's across the street from the cemetery that's in Sebastopol, and there's a huge sidewalk gap there. So they're doing a lot of frontage improvements. So completing that sidewalk gap and then providing some on-street parking there, which will be nice. So that's all I have for Sebastopol.
Great, thank you. Amy, do you have an update for Santa Rosa?
Sure, I'll just provide a brief one. We've got a lot of policy work going on. One big piece of that is our general plan implementation package. So we just adopted a comprehensive update to our general plan in June. And so we're working on the municipal code and zoning map amendments for that. That's going forward to council next month. It includes missing middle housing regulation. So that was a project we've been working on for a number of years, and we're happy to see that through to completion. It also includes some streamlining measures for planning review of EV charging stations. We are also working on a beekeeping ordinance, and that was the need for that was brought to our attention from some residents. And so we'll be publicly releasing that draft in, I think, the next month or two, in addition to an update to our wireless facilities ordinance. So that our telecom ordinance is quite old. And so we're happy. We've been working with BBK to update it so it's consistent with state and federal law. And then just one last long-range planning effort. We've been working with the County of Sonoma on a specific plan for the South Santa Rosa area. So this is actually 1,400 acres of it are within the county's jurisdiction. And we are anticipating the alternatives in about a month and a half. So looking forward to moving into community engagement for that effort as well.
Great. Always lots going on in Santa Rosa. Thank you. Ellen, do you have anything for Healdsburg?
Sure. I think last time I mentioned that I was taking a workshop forward to address some state laws for SB 9, SB 684, 1123, some ADU housing updates, and density bonus updates. So I did do that workshop. It went well. I got feedback, and I'm taking it back to Planning Commission next Tuesday, and still on track, and hopefully we'll have all of that adopted by the end of the year. We did also receive our first SB 330 application. So I'm curious if anybody else has received one, and would love to talk about it. So we received that. So that is for a senior living project. It'll be 67 units. So I'll be working on that too. And then in addition to everything else and all the construction that's going on in Healdsburg, which is a lot.
Okay, great. Thank you for, I'll go ahead and give an update for Katati. Kind of a mix of long range and current development. We're trying to finalize our Centero Way specific plan, moving into zoning and kind of dovetailing that with TOC. So we do have some good TOC examples for ordinance updates, and I'm trying to take that to the Planning Commission in November, and then City Council in December. We're working on finalizing a disposition and development agreement for our 120 East Katati Avenue site. That's the empty lot across from the fire station in Katati, if you're familiar. The city purchased that parcel from a developer who had proposed a 5-story SB 35 tower that many community members were not supportive of. And so the city moved forward with purchasing that. And we're looking at a 3-story mixed use project, 100% affordable. Funding is not secured yet, but we are trying to get the DDA in place, and that's with Freebird Development. I know Santa Rosa and Healdsburg has both worked with Robin. She's been excellent. And then we are trying to get a project called Redwood Row, which has been proposed by City Ventures, into construction. And so they're moving forward with improvement plans. They're fully entitled. It's 125 condominiums and about 45 affordable housing units. Adjacent to the Lowe's, but fronting onto Highway 116, if you all are familiar. And one unique part of that is we have a city street that we're realigning to be a 90-degree angle on Highway 116. It's been planned as a signalized intersection for about a decade. We're taking the lead on that design. We've engaged with Caltrans, and they want a roundabout. And so we're having to pivot, design a roundabout. We've been engaging with SCTCA on that. Very appreciative of all your help. But it's been an interesting process to, refer projects to Caltrans, get no comments about kind of the change. And then when you actually go to implement the policy, then a little different direction, and which means none of the conditions of approval for the adjacent development match the design that Caltrans is hoping to get. So everybody's working together though, and we'll hopefully have a design in place in early 26. Is there anybody on Zoom wishing to jump in? And I'll just look for hands raised to let us know. All right, I'm seeing none, so we're gonna move on to public comment on items 2 through 5. Again, looking for hands raised to let us know if anybody has any public comment. And seeing none.
Mr. Chair, before you adjourn, I have maybe a quick topic to discuss
Sure,
about
yeah.
our next PAC meeting. So our next PAC meeting is just scheduled for December 18th, which is pretty late in December. So just to give a preview on what we have kind of lined up for that meeting, we have our VMT mitigation final recommendations. We have a few data demonstrations lined up. One is for SOCO map. So we have some folks from GIS Central coming to talk about that mapping tool and how it may be a, worth digging into. And then Adam's going to be talking about some of our big data tools that we have that allow you to look at origins and destinations and travel information. And then the draft CTP. So there's a lot kind of lined up for December, but just wanted to check in with the group to make sure that December 18th still works generally. We've met earlier in the month in the past, but if December 18th sounds okay, we can go ahead and keep it.
Okay, yeah, so I would just encourage everyone to look at your holiday schedules, any lack of ability to make the meeting, email Mr. Barney and we'll update any changes to the schedule as we get closer to that meeting agenda. We were not able to adopt our minutes this morning, so it would be great to focus on attendance for next meeting and try to see if we can get a quorum to be able to keep our votes moving forward.
And I have one other announcement from Ada. She wasn't able to make it here today, but she sent a link for a webinar coming up on October 29th, focused on funding and financing critical infrastructure. So they have speakers lined up from Economic and Planning System, City of West Sacramento, and a few other cities talking about municipal funding and financing tools. So I'll go ahead and package this into an email and get it out to the PAC and also our TAC in case you want to sign up for that and participate in that webinar.
All right, thank you, everyone. And with that, we will adjourn at, looks like 10:02.